our summer OptiForum. Even though it's the fall, this is our summer quarter OptiForum. And today we are going to have a special opportunity to speak with two longtime professionals in the nonprofit leadership business. And we are so pleased to have with us today our Executive Director of Optimist International, Benny Ellerbe, and our incoming Executive Director, Cheryl Brenn. Now, Benny has been with Optimist International for 16 years, and he is retiring in just 2 days from now. And so to begin our OptiForum, I would like to start with Benny, and if you would please tell us a little bit of your history so we can understand your credentials as an expert in the nonprofit leadership field, and then we'll have Cheryl do the same, and then I'll start asking you some questions.
Good morning, Mark, and good morning, Optimist. Let's see, credentials. First, I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and also I'm a certified association executive with the American Society of Association Executives. I think like 5% of the membership of that organization are certified. And so I've been 16 years with Optimist. I was 14 years with Junior Chamber International, was their Secretary General, which is also a senior level. I was the Chief Operations Officer for Junior Chamber International. So total, and I was also Executive Director of the American Rose Society for 3 years. So all total, I have about 34 years of leadership at the Executive Director level of associations. And I was a past Vice President of the JC organization, past Club President, National Vice President, Governor, International Vice President, and then went on to serve as Secretary General for 14 years. So I bring a long history of not working at the national level, but also the club level. I think a lot of my success working in optimism is understanding what a club does and how a club operates. So I think I bring that to the table as well.
Thank you. How about you, Cheryl?
Well, my professional background and educational background is not actually dissimilar to Benny. So I have a bachelor's degree. I studied international management at American International College. I do have a master's degree in leadership. I am a certified association executive from ASAE. So I have all those same credentials. My professional history is a little bit different, although in some ways is very much aligned in the fact that I worked for an organization that I also volunteered with. So I understand that. So before coming here, and I've been here, this is week number 8. So I'm excited. And, I came from Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership, where I was the Chief International Programs Officer, and I served in a number of roles working up to that over the 14 years that I was there. Prior to that, I spent 10 years at the New York State School Boards Association. And again, by the time I left there, I was the Deputy Director for Marketing and Member Relations, and also prior to that, really started my career in nonprofit at the New York State Recreation and Park Society, and did some education programming as Director of Professional Services there. So that's about 27 years of nonprofit experience that I bring to the Optimist.
Well, thank you. So we'll do this in the same order for this first question. And what I would like to, I suspect that neither of you started out your career path thinking that this is where you would go. And so, Benny, if I could start with you and ask you, what is it that brought you into the nonprofit sector and into leadership type of positions?
Okay, good question. I actually was in small business back in my hometown of West Monroe, Louisiana, and I operated. I had 6 businesses going at one time. I paid my way through college on a beer truck, Slits, if people know what that is. But working locally, I joined my local club, and I really got into serving the local community, the projects, the programs. I think most of my stories, what I tell at district conferences, are about those early days of being a member in a local club and the experiences I had. And then I got elected to the district level, state level, became the state president, or which would be called the governor of Optimist. And the next thing you know, I'm a national vice president, and I got more and more involved. I became an international chairman, and I bid for a World Congress. And about this time, the opportunity opened up to me apply for the Secretary General of Junior Chamber International, and I jumped at that opportunity, and they were courageous enough to engage me, and I had 14 wonderful years there. So it didn't start out that way, and it never was my dream, but it turned out into a dream career. And honestly, the 14 years there and the 16 years here have been just really, really just unbelievable. And I wouldn't change a day.
Cheryl, how about you?
Again, I think you're going to hear some common themes. So I had no intention of going into nonprofit. I didn't even know that actually was an industry or a career choice at the time. And I was just out of college and really kind of struggling to find where I fit. My first intention actually was to be a foreign service officer. I was a foreign exchange student as a high school student, really wanted to go change the world in some positive way. And I joined a local club. I joined the JCs, and the JCs happened to be really engaged with HOBY, Human Youth Leadership, and volunteered at my first HOBY seminar, joined the JCs because I met all these people like-minded, and really got to a point through some of those activities that I really understood that what I was doing as a volunteer is actually what I wanted to do for a living, and kind of accidentally fell into nonprofit management when it was a JC friend who said, I have a client who needs somebody. And that was New York State Recreation Park Society. And that's how I kind of fell into this. And then I realized very quickly that, this is where I fit. This is where I aligned, with, as far as this is a career that I can work with and understand. And like, these are my people as far as the nonprofit world.
So it sounds like for people out in the audience who are thinking about a career in this form, it's usually going to end up, if you're going to end up in the nonprofit sector, you're going to find your calling first, and then you're going to end up at the management level. I think there are some principles of leadership that apply in the nonprofit sector as well as the for-profit sector, and then there's some special challenges in the nonprofit sector. So let me just start with some general principles of leadership. And Cheryl, I'll start with you this time. What would you say are your top priorities as a leader when you think about how you would handle executive leadership of an organization? What would your starting point be, and what would your highest principles be in terms of how you would go about that?
Wow, that's a great question. Thanks for starting with me. Then he can write his answers down. The thing about leadership in any kind of setting is that there's a lot of different ways to lead. And I do think that for me personally, I always want to lead from a place of integrity that is very aligned with who I am as a human. So this is where like being really in tune with what your values are and understanding that is what will help guide your decision making. There's a few principles that I really subscribe to as far as this goes, and like one is people, right? People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Like that is a fundamental truth for me. And then there's also the follow-up piece to that, which is people are people universally. And if we can remember that and ground ourselves in that, because leadership is all about people and relationships and developing that, I think that actually serves us well. There's a lot of different ways to lead and a lot of different styles of leadership. But for me, I think grounding myself in those really centered principles around who I am as a human, how my values come through, always being and working from a place of integrity first. I'm a very mission-centric, human. And the guy I know for myself is I can't really work for an organization that doesn't align with who I am. That would be an incredible conflict. And I've even had that experience where I've been approached by a couple of different groups and their mission just isn't in alignment with who I am. And when you're in this space, you also have to realize that it is a part of who you are as a person that comes through. And the level of authenticity, I think, comes from being in alignment with a mission and the values of who you are as a person and what the organization represents.
Thank you. How about you, Benny?
Good question. I'm going to echo a lot what Cheryl said. I believe for me, integrity, values are important. I think to be successful, you've got to listen. Not only to, especially when you're working in the nonprofit world, you're working with paid staff and you're working with volunteers. And you really need to listen to the concerns. You need to be able to work with both teams. There are two different teams. They're motivated by different issues. And you need to understand that. As a leader, you always have to, I think, do what you say, lead from the front. I've never asked a staff member to do something I haven't done before or would do before. And the same thing applies to volunteers. You've got to understand that you can be very strong as a staff leader, presenting ideas to your volunteer board. But when the decision is made, it goes against what your recommendation was. You support the team. It's also about being of service and servitude to the organization. Follow up. I have a habit. I never leave my office until every single email on my email address is done. Communication. I get picked on sometimes. I give everybody my cell phone number and I tell them, call me. I think that the ability to be available and as a resource was successful for me. It's not for all people, but I think that is important. Sometimes strategic thinking. Sometimes as a leader, you need to step back for a little bit and get away from the everyday operational activities and think about the long-term objectives. You've got to kind of be able to push yourself back from, because you can get eaten by all these things that go on every single day. Sometimes you have to take a little bit of a recess of yourself and just push back for an hour a day and think of the important things. And I think the last thing that I want to really hit is trust your team. I've always had a theory of hire good people and let them do their jobs. I support my staff. I've always supported the staff. I have their backs when they mess up, which is very rarely. But I'll never criticize them in public, but privately we'll have a chit chat. So, but I think the staff team is very important and supporting that team as well. And honestly, with my presidents, I've had 16 OI presidents. They all have dreams and aspirations. I do my very best as leader of the staff to try to achieve those objectives because each national president international president has a different set of agenda. I mean, it's amazing, and you've got to be a little bit of a gymnast to be able to go between the objectives to make sure they're all met. Because sometimes they're a little contradictory, but you do your best to achieve the results you're looking for. So, team player.
Thank you. So, as I think about nonprofit leadership as opposed to leadership in the private sector, there are certain challenges, and I would like to address three of them in separate questions. One may be the economics of the nonprofit sector, where your income comes from, and how you go about increasing that. Another is the volunteer aspect that you've already touched on a little bit, as opposed to you're challenged with volunteer leadership as well as your professional staff leadership. And the third one that I'd like to start with, and Benny, since you already touched on it, I'll go to you first on this one, is the self-care. Because as you both came into this from the point of view of being a part of the mission of the organization, so we as volunteers take that mission and we have our regular work lives, and then we do this volunteer things on top of it, which is a lot of time that the volunteers do. Now, as a professional staff, you live this and you have the push, whether it's from internal yourself or from the outside, to say, well, you also have to do that volunteer part. So where does it stop? How do you know when to turn off the light and take some time for yourself? And how do you do that? So I think that's the question I really want to get at, because people who are entering this field, the tendency, there's a certain type of person that's drawn to this field. And that person is the kind of person who will just keep going no matter what and never stop because you believe in the mission. So how do you personally set those self-care limits for yourself and what would you recommend for people who are thinking about joining this field?
Well, that's a terrible question for me. I don't know if I ever have set limits. I mean, I've been known. I think I've given my cell phone to about 900 governors, and they will call me. I do tell them when LSU is playing, don't call me. I will not answer the phone. It's family. I have 8 grandchildren and 1 great grandchild you may see on the magazine that I'm holding. It's that family moments. I love to cook. I'll take time to do things that I enjoy. I love playing golf. I will be out there a lot more very soon, starting probably Friday morning. But you have to step back. You have to step back and say, okay, this is my day. I love travel. Actually, when I do district meetings, I've always enjoyed doing district meetings because I get a chance to see the people. People drive me. People motivate me. I get charged when I'm out in the field. But it's a terrible question because I do pretty much run 24/7. I answer emails at 8 o'clock at night. I'll answer phones on a Saturday morning because that's when the district meetings are. And that's when the questions come up about policies or bylaws or insurance. So that's a tough question for me to answer properly because I usually don't turn off much. But usually it's cooking and family.
Okay. So your answer is you're not good at it.
I'm not good at it. I'm terrible. I am very terrible at it. And I think that's one of my success traits, though, too.
I suspect that's going to be true of anybody who gets into your positions for both of you. But Cheryl, how do you approach this?
Again, you're going to hear some common themes. So this is not my strong suit. I will assure you of that. However, I'm kind of looking at this as again, a fresh start with another organization to try to draw some boundaries. And boundaries are only good if you can actually uphold them. And part of that is trying to find where that balance point is between service to your constituencies and time to recharge your batteries. This is definitely not an area that I have been good at in the past, and I will work on it. However, I think it's some of those same things. It's knowing like when you can make yourself available, communicating when you're available, communicating when you're not, and what is sacred, right? What is sacred time for you? And there's certain times that are sacred for me, like Sunday mornings. That is actually sacred time for me. And the things that I like to do that help me kind of disconnect from work and cell phones and all of that is, hiking and yoga and time with my pets and, spending that time with my family. I happen to love to bake. He can cook.
Yeah.
I can bake. It could be a really dangerous combination. Yeah. And just to just unplug for a bit. I think it is perfectly acceptable to actually communicate, I will be unavailable for these times. However, I also think that, we do have to make ourselves available when our people need us. And, communicating that and setting up some boundaries around that, like I used to do Sunday evening office time, and I would communicate that. So volunteers knew that that was a time we could talk about any subject. So I think that those are things that you always have to be mindful of and set appropriate boundaries because we are not in the business of association work doesn't happen between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. You're absolutely, we have to be available when volunteers are available and live in that flexibility of space, but also preserve, some time for ourselves because you cannot. The idea that I can do it all and I'll do whatever it takes to get it all done is actually not sustainable for any person. And it's just not a healthy way to live.
So if I'm as a layperson and interpreting your two responses, it sounds to me like the nonprofit executive at the top levels is a position where you are going to be really immersed and never really get away from it. But the key element I think that I heard from both of you is to find some spaces, whether it's on the golf course or in the baking, but where you can focus all of your attention and really remove yourself from that, even for just short periods of time, and that will regenerate your attitudes and things. Because it's too easy, I think, to just believe you have to continue always being on. And I think everyone needs those times, whether it's just a few hours on the golf course or whatever. So that's what I'll take away as the recommendation for our potential future executives, is that along the way, find something you can be passionate about that you can do in short amounts of time. So the second question has to do with the economics of working in the nonprofit industry. And each field has its own income stream, for lack of a better term. And it's often not tied to the actual mission of the organization. So your mission is to do one thing, but that doesn't generate income. So as an executive, your responsibility is to find a way to generate that income to support the mission. So let me start with Cheryl on this one. And how would you approach that, or just in general terms, how, for people thinking about entering the field, what do you think is a good principles to work with?
Well, first, let me start by saying that nonprofit is not a budgetary goal. Nonprofit is a status of a corporation by the IRS. It is absolutely not your budgetary goal, and and that is sometimes a challenge for people. I'm like, no, by spending all of the revenue actually doesn't achieve the nonprofit status. It is literally just a status of a corporation as recognized by the IRS. We actually should be able to run our organizations in a way that are financially healthy and that are putting money in reserves and making sure that we're looking at the long-term strategy and looking out for the future of the organization. Generating revenue is the thing that keeps me up at night. That is, and Benny's probably going to tell you the same thing. Revenue generation is and for most EDs, I was going to say it's probably the thing that consumes a lot of your time. Looking at the bottom line and trying to run a healthy organization and a financially prudent organization and being good stewards of wherever your money comes from. I do think that, like any organization, though, a diversified revenue base. So here at Optimist, obviously, a lot of our revenue comes off of member dues. But we also need to look at other ways to generate, whether that is through programs and services and opportunities that members want or non-members want to get involved with. It is okay for us to look for those types of avenues. But diversifying your revenue streams is an incredibly important part of any plan because it just leads to sustainability. And I think we've all learned over the last couple of decades, especially, that our field is continuing to change. And if we don't find adaptive ways to generate revenue, we can't continue to just operate how we did perhaps in the 90s or even earlier than that, because that is not where sustainable revenue is going to come from. We have to diversify, and we have to look to always achieve those revenue goals. And again, look to the future. It is not enough for us to only generate what we need to operate this year. It's important for us to look how we generate revenue and income to set us up for the future. And certainly COVID has taught all of us, we have to look to the future because the unexpected will come again.
Any same question?
Finances are always an issue because most of our monies come in, as Cheryl said, through our member revenues, through dues, attendance to conventions, training programs, buying products online. The revenue stream is mainly from membership. And finding those non-member due revenue streams is extremely difficult. Corporations are more self-centered now. Corporations used to be very pro-nonprofit friendly in a way, but most companies now are more encourage their own bottom lines and their own activities, charitable activities. Once upon a time, banks would pay members' dues. Banks, CPA firms, law firms would afford the dues. It's getting more difficult in those areas now. I've been blessed. I'm toot horny with Connie and Teresa and some really great finance teams. We've had 13 out of the last 14 years we've had surplus budgets, but they're getting more difficult each year. Our membership has declined. It's across the board. I work a lot with other associations. Every association, churches, trade associations, almost the entire U.S. social fabric, membership is declining across the board. It's just not Optimist. And so we've got to find do new streams. And we're certifying products are optimistic or other ideas that we can come across. Maybe getting and selling our golf materials, golf paraphernalia, getting more active in other areas of sales to sell optimistic type products. I think those are some areas we need to look at very strongly moving forward. But revenues are going to get tighter, no doubt about that. And this coming year is going to be a tough one.
So economics has a lot to do with some of the staff issues that come to the executive director's attention. We tend to, in the nonprofit industry, and I'm generalizing, I'm actually going to ask your opinions on this, to overload our staff because we, as prudent spenders of the money we receive from whether it's grants or donations or membership dues, we feel we need to be responsible with that expenditures. And so we tend to shortchange our staffing resources, and we demand a lot of production out of a small staff. I think this is generally true in the nonprofit sector. I'll ask your opinion on that. And what are your best tools for managing that issue with your staff? And Benny, I'm going to start with you on this one.
And you're spot on. It's tough. When I started here 16 years ago, we had 37 staff full time. Today we have about 23 to 24 full time staff. We have excellent staff, but in a lot of areas we're one deep. We have Amy Keller does joy and programs. Sharon Pardon does golf. If we lose either Amy or Sharon, we take a hit because the institutional knowledge, the programs, experiences run those two programs are in those ladies' heads. Motivation. I've always fought for very good benefits. Usually in the nonprofit sector, our salaries are always lagging behind trade associations and other opportunities. We will have some turnover in some areas because they come. I know in communications and marketing, we've had probably 4 very excellent managers in marketing over the last 16 years. But they come, they hone their skills, which is what they should be doing, and they go work for larger companies like Express Scripts. I've lost 3 girls to Express Scripts because they know we're an area they can seek talent and they pay big salaries. So, but we try to give very good healthcare benefits. So we have a good 401k program. We try to motivate that. I cooked dinner, lunch for everybody yesterday. We try to do chili cook-offs. We try to have some socials together. We have a very nice party every December. We try to motivate each other. We're almost like a family. I'll use that expression, family unit. We care about each individual. I do what's called walk-arounds. I'll go in every single day. I'll be in somebody's office to find out what's going on with that department or that individual. And find out what their obstacles are, or what challenges they have that day, and do my best to make sure they have the tools. And that's the other thing, make sure they have the tools to do the job right. Technology has changed so much, and we really have to stay on the curve of providing them the skills and tools to be successful. And I think that's probably a goal too, the executive director, is to keep them. And I wish we had a better budget for training, outside training like in Excel or Word, or we could do a better job in our budgeting for giving us a little bit more money to train our folks.
Cheryl, same question.
There is never enough time in the day to get everything done, and I think to your point, Mark, is like this is not unique to Optimist. This is actually one of those things, and especially if you're looking at this as a career move or you wanted to work there, sometimes you actually have to just get comfortable with being uncomfortable about the fact that to-do list will never be empty. Like it will always have things to do. But I also, there's some things that Benny talked about that are really legitimate, and understanding that our people, our staff really care about the mission, and let's find time to actually focus on that. Let's find time to celebrate the wins. Let's find time to actually, re-energize ourselves. Let's go out and do a project together. Let's go and have some of this. If there's nothing about nonprofit management, and especially as you get into senior leadership, that is 9 to 5. It is always going to be, 9 to 9 or something to that. But you do have to get a little comfortable with the uncomfortableness of you will not get to everything every day. And that doesn't mean that it's not a priority. It just means that, we can come into the office with the best intention of a plan and 15 minutes later have it be blown up by the first email you read. And, that's part of the adaptability that I think that we need in this. And I also think that we just have to care about each other, respect each other, and understand that we're here to support each other. People have bad days. Crisis happens. You know what? Nothing comes before family. And whereas this can be a family unit as well, like we always have to remember that, this should not be the most important thing in your life, right? Your job should be really important, but if you have a family, you need to go. And I've been in that situation too, where you get a phone call and you drop everything and get on an airplane. And making sure that we provide an environment where people feel supported and connected, I think is really important.
So thank you for those answers. And probably the primary responsibility of being an executive director, but you also have a responsibility in terms of motivating the volunteers and providing resources for the volunteers to be successful. And tell us a little bit about your approach to how you can assess the volunteer needs and provide the services that they need to be successful. And I'll start with you, Cheryl.
I think one of that is just listening, right? Listening to what volunteers tell us and how they can articulate what their needs are. But we also have to recognize that sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And you don't necessarily know what you're going to need to do a job. So part of that comes from the professional staff that can say and look at and analyze and assess, hey, look, if we want to make people successful, we have to give them the tools and resources. And developing some of those, being a little bit ahead potentially of what volunteers need, but also just doing some listening to volunteers, asking the question. And listening to those responses, and not a place of judgment, but literally a place of information gathering. It's not enough to create resources if we don't deliver them in a way that actually are effective in the way that volunteers need them.
Okay. Good question. And I think some of that comes back from my background, the fact that I was very, very active in club leadership and state and district. I think every governor, every local club president has a different hot button. Over the years, I've come up with a whole host of things, I think, to communicate with them. I was big on road signs. To me, road signs was always a good one. Add 5 members to your club, I get your road sign out to you. First, it was marketing. It was also plus membership. So one of the first trips I did was with Mike Listenberger. We took a 3-week road trip through the U.S. and Canada and back around to, I think we were on the road for almost 3 straight weeks. We were seeing probably 4, 5, 6 more than that chat clubs per day in zone meetings. I think over that trip, we saw almost 3,000 optimists in the 16 days. Hearing them, talking to them, being with them in their clubs. I know, like Granby, Quebec. I've been in Granby, Quebec 3 times. You see what they're doing. That's a great club. You get a chance to be out there in the field with them and understand. When you go to district meetings, you understand, you listen. I've had the opportunity to governor-elect conferences and governor's conference to hear what they're needing. I'm confident. I used to brag about this. I never say the word no. If you have a viable project somewhere out there, new club building effort, I will never say the word no by getting you some resources to help you finish that club out. So I think it's an attitude of support. listening to them and meeting their needs. I'll get, if someone calls me right now and says I got a club in the middle of Nebraska that needs to be built, we'll get those folks some aid, or it's Jim Boyd or a governor from another district, but we'll get them some support. And I think that's the attitude of always trying to listen to those volunteers and support their thoughts. And it also goes to the board level. The board level, the board is the strategic organization's leadership. And that's where the directives, like finding different sources of revenue streams and that will have to be made. Those decisions have to be made at the board, and supporting those and finding information, reading, finding what other organizations are doing, listening with Rotary and Kiwanis, what they're doing to see if they've figured out a different way of peeling the onion. And I think that's part of the job of the exec director too, is the latest trends and to be successful with clubs.
Now, I want to, in more general terms, in any business, it's incumbent on the leadership, and it's something you touched on a few minutes ago, Cheryl, is to envision the future and what can happen in the future. For instance, we didn't know how COVID would affect us when it first started to come, and we had to figure out how to do that. And every industry has had to do that. And Benny, you were, this wouldn't apply when you were with Optimist because you've been here for 16 years, but when you started out with JC's, there was not such a thing as a computer. And so the world is a little bit different, and I'm not trying to put you all. The same thing with me. I was in banking when we would
get your abacus out.
We had these tracker feeds of data that would come, and things, but we didn't have computers to keep track of this stuff. So, what I'm trying to say with that is that the world that you lived in when you started with JC's and the methods you used to be successful would not work in today's world. And now we're seeing COVID and maybe even the natural disasters that continue to plague us. And so part of leadership is to envision what our organization needs to do to stay relevant and to address things as they come along. So I'm going to make this a generalized question so that you can answer in any way that makes sense to you. And I'll start with you, Benny. What do you think are your strategies for staying ahead of the curve and pointing your staff and volunteers in the direction that you think they need to pay attention to as the world changes around us?
Good question, and it's a very difficult question because all the associations, I know in November next month, Rotary, Kiwanis, Optimist, and Lions are all getting together for a summit to discuss this very issue. Technology, we have to stay ahead on technology. Things like Zoom. I mean, all of a sudden, our folks, and I made a comment. I think we had a Wall Street Journal article earlier this year, and our members went to Zoom like ducks to water. We can communicate. I can be with a club in California in the morning or the afternoon. I can be in Michigan an hour later, all by Zoom. The ability to train and communicate to our members is unbelievable too now. I think our clubs have to embrace this even more. Locally, we need to figure out how to do more local social media marketing in our communities. There's a lot of members out there, a lot of individuals that want to contribute to their community. They just don't know how. And we do have a vehicle. We have an instrument called our club structure. Our club structure has to change. It can't be the club structure in 1919 where 40 guys and hats and cigars get in a room together and talk about a project. We have to be a very socially independent. Now, e-clubs, we've tried the e-member concept. We haven't figured it out yet. I think we're not there yet. And I know Rotary, nobody has figured out how to have the online member yet and be successful. But we can do some online things, arrange cleanup in parks or marathons. We can use social media to enhance our clubs. I think we have to use the technology that's available now to energize our local community bases. Because I think there's the individuals we're not touching that we can bring into the Optimist world to assist our clubs. And maybe they're just volunteers, maybe they're not members, but we can engage them. And I think that we'll get the recognition, the public relations locally for the event. Then one or two of those members, individuals, will join our club. So I think we have to use technology, have to.
Yeah. You know, I think COVID has taught everybody that we have to be able to be adaptable, right? And it was either adapt or you weren't going to survive. And how rapidly this pandemic actually impacted organizations. We saw that it was in other parts of the world. However, how rapidly it came here and the significant, swift impact that it had on our society and every organization in that. Now, that doesn't mean that it was necessarily devastating for every organization, but learning how to adapt and recognizing that we actually won't go backwards. So when we're through this, we actually have to continue to move forward. And I think, Benny made some really good points in that. This kind of medium is not going to go away. We are not actually going to come through the pandemic and say, okay, now it's back to business as usual, because business as usual has been redefined. And we have to be thinking forward and recognizing that as we continue, and if we want to actually have another century of impact in our communities, then we also have to move forward. The idea of optimism as a way to live your life is really significant. And I actually think that it is far more relevant today than it ever has been. And really leaning into who we are as an organization and the tenets that we oppose that we live by. If you think about making the best of ourselves and our community and doing the best for kids, there are so many opportunities there within that structure to actually make such an incredible impact. However, like Benny mentioned, that may look different. The way we engage people may be different. We're talking about kind of 5 generations right now in the market space for our clubs, and we shouldn't discount any of those. However, it may mean that we have to adapt the way we engage with people to where and meet them where they are, not where we are, and be able to let go of some of the things that perhaps we're connected to. And if we kind of had the club in the way you met for the last 20 years has worked for you. However, if we're looking at membership and it's again the same people and it's not necessarily relating to new people, then we have to look at the way those clubs operate and be willing to say, hey, how is it that we become welcoming and relevant and addressing the needs of today? People don't necessarily have the time that they had to get away for lunch meetings in the middle of the day. Like that kind of model doesn't work necessarily for everyone's schedule. Whereas, 20, 30 years ago, it was very, that was part of the culture. And it was even part of the corporate culture that you would go and have these types of meetings. That's not necessarily the way that people work, nor is it the way that our corporate culture exists. So I think those are all things that are critical. And it's not to look at the way that anybody's doing something and saying, well, you're doing it wrong. It's actually moreover, how do we look at things and become more relevant today than other organizations, or how do we become more relevant to the way people need to connect with us?
Well, thank you for opening up the optimism door, because I'm going to jump on my soapbox in a second. But let me pull something out of what you both said. And I like the way you termed it, Cheryl, which is our world is constantly being redefined. So the world we live in today is not the same world we lived in even 15 years ago. And there are sometimes, like this year with COVID, we had to be much faster about how the world changed. And sometimes it's more slow. We don't even notice it while it's happening. And I think it's important for our organizations to stay nimble and adapt with changing times. But I want to now jump on my optimism soapbox, because I think the greatest tool in our toolbox in life, and this is for any human being or organization, is that the optimistic attitude enables us to not be stopped by adversity. And so optimists recognize that we have the power to enable change. We just need to find the way to do it. And so having that mindset that we're not going to be stopped by whatever adversity we run into enables us to broaden our thinking to the point where we could find new solutions to problems. And so optimism is so important in everything we do. And I say it in the sense that just knowing you'll be successful, knowing you have the power to do that yourself, not dependent on outside circumstances to fix, like we can't wait for COVID to go away. I don't think it's ever going away in the total sense. Now we'll find ways to adapt and live in the new world. But optimists then say, we not only will we not wait for this to go away, we're going to build strategies that will enable us to be successful in the new world. And that's the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. So the pessimist will make the easy choice and say, well, there's nothing I can do. Whereas the optimist will make the more difficult choice, the choice that involves work, but we will do that work to be successful in the end. And so thanks for opening up that optimism door, because I wanted to jump through that for a second. As we come to the end of our time, I wanted to give you each an opportunity to think about your start in your career and where you are today, and what advice would you give to the early self, you, as you entered your first nonprofit. I'm going to give Benny the first opportunity on this one, because he's certainly got the longer history and the wisdom of age to go with it, and I share your wisdom in terms of the opportunity to earn it. But what would you advise somebody who's entering their early career in a nonprofit sector, and what advice might you even have given to yourself as you think of you starting out in the JCs?
Wow, it's a long time ago. I don't know how my memory goes back that far. First, there's an old country song about find a job that you love to do and do it, and so that's probably the biggest key. I love what I do. Basically, almost, I hate telling everybody this, I almost do it for nothing. I got paid for the last 16 years here and 14 years at JCI for something I enjoyed doing. I truly enjoyed the job. I think that's the first thing. God, looking back, I said this earlier, I don't think I'd change a day. I truly dove into it feet first. I enjoyed what I did. I built a lot of unbelievable close friends around the U.S. and the world. It drove me. It's my inner self. It's one of the reasons I have a hard time not having private time, because I enjoy what I do. This is kind of what I do. Keep your integrity. Always challenge. Always present your issues. Your issues always will not win out the board vote, but walk away as a team, part of the team. Don't become upset. We're going to lose a club here. We're going to lose a club there. I always tell new club builders that people who open small businesses, like 75% of small businesses fail in the first 2 years. So that's people who put their life and their heart and their soul and every nickel they can find into a small business, and they still fail. So we're going to lose clubs. Don't never become disenchanted when we build a club and it doesn't work. The best club I ever built lasted 1 year. The club I built on September 30th to get an award lasted 27 years. And so success is what you make of it. And I have a saying, never give up, never say die. It's not how many times you get up, it's how many times you get back in life that counts. I believe that fully. Always get back up. And there's always going to be a different day. And I always look, and I'm an optimist at heart. So it's always going to be brighter tomorrow. And remember your friends, never burn a bridge. Always keep your friends in mind and support them and help them, and just give it all you got.
Wow. Okay. Now I got to follow that. Okay. one of my favorite quotes that I found so far, because I, of course, I'm a quote person. I look for things that will help me develop messages and create. And one of them I found about optimism is, optimism is the foundation of courage. And I'm like, oh, I really like that. It really resonates with me. And I think that is if I were to give advice to anybody looking to go into this field, is actually ground yourself in some courage. It's, in some ways, nonprofit management is the kinder, gentler side of like the business world or that. However, in other ways, it is not. It can be a little dog eat dog, but we have the ability to change the world, and sometimes in these really small incremental ways. But if you think about all change, it actually is these little pieces of change that make the biggest difference. And I think, just like having the courage to go out and say, yeah, I think this is where I fit. Again, I fell into this as a career because I literally said, gosh, I really want to do for a living what I do as a volunteer. Now, again, I didn't necessarily start with the organizations that I was volunteering with. I looked at that as I really like this type of work. This is what feeds my soul. This is where I found my people. And again, not great surprise, many of my friends are, in the nonprofit sector. Many of the friends that I have are people I volunteered with. Not a great surprise, because it's that like-mindedness. But I think that the thing about choosing this as a career is also understanding there are 1.5 million nonprofit organizations in the United States alone. So that's just in the US. Think about what there is globally. And there is always a way to make a difference. If you are chasing dollars, probably not the industry for you. However, you can make a comfortable living in the nonprofit sector. And we should never be ashamed of that, because it's hard work. However, if that's what motivates you, this probably isn't the industry for you, because your motivation does come from that intrinsic part of we can make a difference working together. And I think that's what always has to be kind of foundational, is you really believe in, again, the mission of what you're doing. And whether that's here or at another organization, being aligned and recognizing that it's so important. It was so important for me to kind of bring my work through who I am as a person. Like, I spend a tremendous amount of time working. I'm not going to be one of these people that's like, okay, I got to turn it off. So to have that alignment in value and to be aligned with the work that I do as part of who I am as a person, always going to be important. And I think it centers me to be able to do this work more effectively.
Well, thank you too. I think if we've learned nothing else today, is that it's a very special kind of person who's drawn to the nonprofit sector as a career. And Optimist International has been very fortunate, number one, to have had the Benny for the last 16 years. And I'm so grateful that you were still here while I was president. And our organization is so much better for your presence here over the last 16 years.
Thank you.
And I know you know that, and you don't need, and you probably don't want me to say stuff like this right now, but I feel the need to do that. And at the same time, I look with great optimism to the future, because I feel like we are going to be well served by our new executive director, and that I see great things in store for us in the future. And 16 years from now, and I hope you last longer than 16 years, that we'll look back and say, this was amazing that we were able to follow such great leadership from Benny with the great leadership that Cheryl is going to provide us over the next years. So as president of this organization at the current time, for 2 more days, Benny and I leave together.
Yep.
Let me just tell you how grateful I am for both of you deciding Optimist International was the place you wanted to spend your life. And it is really that kind of personal commitment, as you both expressed, that this is who you are. This is essentially what you do for a hobby is what you do for a living. And so that's why it doesn't stop. But it is sometimes a thankless job, and it is a rewarding job at the same time. And so I'm so appreciative of what we've done in the past and what we're going to do in the future. This is my last OptiForum as president of the organization. I would like to just say a couple of things in conclusion, and that is that, number one, this has been broadcast on YouTube and Facebook Live. And so you will be able to find recorded versions of this if you want to view it again. Maybe you joined us in the middle and you want to see the entire thing. You will be able to see the entire OptiForum at any time on YouTube, and you'll just have to look for it. I'm so thrilled that we've been able to do this. This is my fourth OptiForum, and these started with our last international president, Adrian Elcock. And this year we decided to focus on our 4 quarterly themes for our Choose Optimism year. We started with resilience, and then we did happiness in the second quarter with our musical happiness program. In our third quarter at our international convention in Atlanta, we talked about rallying, and we had such a great opportunity to share with a Paralympian whose name is escaping me, Blake. And what a fantastic event that was, and how optimistic. If anybody represents optimism better than him, I don't know who it is. And so, yeah, that might be one you want to review and find on YouTube as well. And now this one, where our quarter this year was on success, and I think we have represented here today the past success of our organization and the future success of our organization in 2 outstanding leaders. And speaking for all of our volunteers, we appreciate all that you and your staff do, and what a great organization this is. So thank you very much. And with that, we conclude our 4th OptiForum of this year.